Tales of Estolia, by Sashina Kerfman. Volume 1, The Promise of Zacharias. Part 2, The Connection. Chapter 1, All That Might Have Been. Palmyra, 736 years before the current era. Deity loves us. I have no doubts. Our most poignant, most dramatic events lead us to happiness and acceptance, if we are open to the message of Deity in our self and soul. What we are not blessed to receive in this life will be ours in Horizon. If we maintain our faith, and accept the vagaries of chance and free will that might steal some of our happiness during this brief time on earth, we will be comforted by the knowledge of all that will be ours in the fullness of time, and beyond, when our time here upon the planet ceases to be, and the seeds of our earthly existence will sprout an infinity of new worlds wherein time will begin again. Author unknown. Sebastian pulled on his breeches and a tunic, thinking about his plans. Today he was going to store away some of the winter feed in the south barn. Once Dumeril returned, they would begin halter training the newest crop of young horses, one of his favorite tasks. Once dressed, he followed the twisting path from the small cluster of buildings that housed the families of those who worked on Groban's estate. Several women were singing, laughing, and talking, and he paused outside the barn to look towards them. There were three he knew very well: Lucetta, Carlotta, and Violetta were on the edge of the stream, working. He waved towards them before slipping inside the barn. While his eyes adjusted from the bright morning sunshine to the dim interior, his thoughts wandered to Corella, Groban's daughter. He would see her tonight. She would return from visiting her best friend, Marina. Marina's father's lands were vast, and it took half a day to travel there from Groban's modest estate. Corella's brother, Dumeril, left to fetch her 3 days before. She had been gone for 2 weeks. They would meet in the summer house. Just thinking about her caused a tightening in his loins. He adjusted his breeches and then, after taking a deep breath, began his work. After several hours, he paused when a rectangle of light indicated that someone had entered the dim interior of the barn. By this point, he was wearing only his breeches, and his upper torso was glistening with the sweat of toil. Groban was a thoughtful employer, always seeing to the comforts of his workers. Someone was delivering water and a light repast. He set aside his pitchfork and used his discarded tunic to wipe the sweat from his brow. It was Lucetta. "Lush, listen, Lucetta." She had a basket with some bread and cheese and a flask of liquid. She waited patiently while he ate. He had sampled her before, as had several of the men who worked for Groban. The light musky scent of her arousal was familiar to him. He tried to block the memory of her skillful touch and mobile mouth. He passed her the basket after he finished eating. She dropped it, and they both bent to retrieve it. It was more than 2 weeks since Corella left. Her laces were undone enough so that he could see one dark areola peeking at him and the generous swelling curve of her breasts. Without thinking, he reached out and brushed the fabric aside, caressing her. He pulled her into his arms, and she cupped the bulge of his arousal with a feline growl of satisfaction. She was skilled at pleasing a man, and he did not think about anything as she sank to the fresh hay and pulled him down onto her. Sebastian groaned at his release, his hips thrusting several more times until he was fully spent. For a few seconds, he allowed Lucetta to take the bulk of his weight, before he rolled off her and lay on his back, breathing heavily. He was just pulling her to her feet when they both heard a shriek of outrage echoing through the rafters in the barn. As one, they turned to look at the woman standing staring at them in dazed disbelief. "Sebastian." Corella's voice was shocked. Lucetta hastily stooped to pick up her skirt, pulling it over her exposed body, and then pulled her tunic over her breasts. With a furtive look towards Corella, Lucetta brushed the hay off her skirts as she turned to slip out of the barn. Sebastian suddenly grasped exactly what it was he had done, and moreover, what he had thrown away. The look of shattered disillusionment on Corella's face solidified within him. He would give everything he owned if he could go back in time and ignore Lucetta. He recalled one of his father's maxims: "We are the sum of our decisions, the product of our actions, and our character is only as strong as any fabric rent by our falsehoods. Make choices so that your character is strengthened." If his family were still alive, he would be too ashamed to face them. He wanted to hide from Corella as well, but the only thing he had left to give her was his honest acceptance of whatsoever she wished to say or do to him. He must be willing to face the pain he'd inflicted upon her, and the knowledge he had lost her love. He fastened his breeches and brushed stray bits of hay off them before standing straight to accept whatever she wished to say. "Mama said you were not to be trusted." The pain was strumming through her voice. She was breathing heavily, clutching her abdomen. She cupped her hand over her mouth and turned to flee, making it only a few feet before vomiting. He followed her, wanting to comfort her, to tell her how much he loved her and regretted the pain she was feeling. But words were a weak vessel to carry the message seething within his soul. She had no reason to believe him. He handed her a square of fabric to wipe her mouth. "I am sorry, Corella. I do not wish to ever see you again." Each of her words was slow and definitive. In her defiance, she was more alluring than any other woman he had ever known. He opened his mouth to try to plead with her, beg her to give him one more chance. A fierce slap stopped him and he rocked backwards. He wished he could provide her comfort. Physically assaulting him would increase her distress. In fact, anything he did other than honor her wishes would cause her pain. He picked up his tunic and satchel and walked away, forcing himself to not look back. He would not even return to his quarters. With every step he took, he felt the pain of separation grow. As he walked, he sought an outlet for the agony he was feeling by composing a poem. He would record it on the parchment in his satchel. When he finished, he recited it again, setting the rhyme and meter to match his steady pace. It focused his remorse and shame, but also gave him hope. It was his only possession, describing the destruction of his dreams, crumbling into dust as he walked away from the love of his life. All that might have been. 'Tis agony, this cruel event, to finally see the boundaries of morality and integrity. When our choices catch up with us, and those voices within, tease us, torment us with what is, and with what might have been. Irony flavors my every meal, as I dine upon the fruit of my deceptions. The sharpest blade, ne'er sharper than knowledge of what might have been. How can the heart withstand this loss, the cutting pain of sorrow? How can the mind contain the agony of self-inflicted wounds? And oh, how long eternity, when each moment fills with the sorrow of all that might have been. Contemplate your choices. Think. Muse before you choose. Ponder, before you select, or you'll regret forevermore what you can't forget. Now the road to damnation stretches in my sight. Each league I tread upon its length gifts me the view. A view to torment, to tease, to tantalize. To make me see what might have been had I chosen you. The vision of your loveliness flavors each moment of my happiness. The joyous life I never knew, because I chose to dishonor you. I wanted to forget, to end this life, and my memories. But wisdom I needed much earlier, visited me to say that though I seek oblivion, all I reap is damnation, and the memory of my deceit forevermore. Courage to walk this lonely road, to remember my perfidy and your pain as you discovered me. Perhaps no solace awaits in eternity for me, but I must be brave and walk a road of penance. Ne'er will sword, dagger or scythe cut with sharper edge than my deception sliced your tender heart. Oh, the pain of what might have been. And yet, I feel a moment of radiant warmth in this, the winter of my self-contempt. That says to me, hark. See. Remember your love, her face, her faith, and recall that love attracts love. You will with your beloved be. Perhaps a reconciliation see. Or simple forgiveness, might be all there is for thee. But there is hope, my heart. I say to you, to me, to our future, not written yet. You'll see. Time enough, to mend the rents. To smooth the road to eternity. To embrace the possibilities that I may see the everlasting joy of all that might have been. And still, may yet be.